What happens when a single moment of entitled arrogance collides with unimaginable power? We've all seen videos of terrible passengers, but what if the target of that scorn wasn't just any person, but the daughter of the billionaire who owns the airline? This isn't just a story about a stolen seat in first class. It's the story of Flight 712 from Los Angeles to New York, a flight that never took off. It's the story of Caroline Sterling, a woman who thought she could bully her way to the front, and Serafina Monroe, the quiet young woman she targeted. And it's the story of her father, Julian Monroe, a CEO who, with a single phone call, chose to ground an entire Airbus A380 to teach one person a lesson in consequences, a lesson that would unravel her life in the most spectacularly karmic way imaginable. Stay with us as we reveal how one woman's prejudice didn't just get her kicked off a flight. It torpedoed a $500 million deal and ended her career in seconds. Before we begin, comment where you are watching from today, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Now let's get into it. The first-class lounge at LAX for Aura Airlines was a carefully curated bubble of tranquility. Soft jazz whispered from hidden speakers, mingling with the gentle clinking of porcelain and the low hum of conversations about stock options and Nantucket summers. It was a world designed to insulate its patrons from the frantic chaos of the main terminal. In a plush armchair tucked into a quiet corner, Serafina Monroe was an island of calm within that bubble. At 24, she possessed a quiet intensity that often made people underestimate her. Dressed in tailored charcoal trousers, a simple silk blouse, and elegant but unbranded leather flats, she could have been a promising young architect or a grad student, not the sole heiress to the Monroe Empire, an empire that included this very airline. She was engrossed in a thick hardback book, its cover displaying complex schematics of sustainable urban development. For her, this flight to New York wasn't a vacation. It was the final leg of her journey to a global symposium where she was a keynote speaker. She had learned early in life that the Monroe name was both a key and a cage. Her father, Julian Monroe, was a force of nature, a man who had built a global logistics and aviation conglomerate from the ground up. He was brilliant, demanding, and fiercely protective. Serafina, however, preferred the world of blueprints and community projects to boardrooms and balance sheets. She deliberately cultivated an understated presence, finding anonymity to be the greatest luxury wealth could buy. Her peaceful reading was shattered by a voice that seemed to slice through the lounge's serene atmosphere. "No, I told you. Liquidate the position if it drops below 150. I don't pay you to ask questions, I pay you to get results. Make it happen." Serafina glanced up. A woman in her late 40s, Caroline Sterling, was pacing near the panoramic window, a phone pressed to her ear. She was the antithesis of Serafina's subtlety. A crisp, white Burberry trench coat was draped over her shoulders. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a severe, immaculate bob, and a large, diamond-encrusted watch glittered on her wrist as she gesticulated wildly. Everything about her screamed money, but it was a loud, insecure scream, not the quiet confidence of inherited stability. Caroline snapped her phone shut and surveyed the lounge with an air of theatrical impatience, her eyes briefly flicking over Serafina. It was a dismissive, evaluative glance, the kind one gives to a piece of furniture that might be slightly out of place. Serafina saw it, registered the faint curl of contempt on the woman's lips, and simply turned a page in her book. She had been on the receiving end of that look her entire life, the silent question, the unspoken assumption that she didn't belong in spaces like this. A gate agent's voice, smooth and professional, announced the pre-boarding for Aura Airlines Flight 712 to JFK for first-class passengers. Serafina placed her bookmark carefully, slipped the heavy volume into her leather tote, and made her way towards the gate. She preferred to board last, to minimize her time on the plane, but today she just wanted to settle in and review her notes. As she joined the short queue, she found herself directly behind Caroline Sterling, who was loudly complaining to the gate agent about the lack of gluten-free biscotti in the lounge. The agent, a young man named Ben, was a model of strained politeness, I do apologize, ma'am. I'll be sure to pass that along to our catering manager. You do that, Caroline sniffed, snatching her boarding pass back. For the prices you people charge, one expects a certain standard. Serafina offered Ben a small, sympathetic smile as she presented her own digital pass. He scanned it, and his professional mask brightened into genuine warmth. Miss Monroe, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Seat 2A is ready for you. I hope you have a wonderful flight. The use of her name was part of the premier service for their most valued clients, a detail her father insisted upon. It was a courtesy she appreciated, but rarely encouraged. Thank you, Ben. I'm sure I will. She walked down the jet bridge, the scent of filtered air and jet fuel filling her senses. She was looking forward to the next 6 hours of uninterrupted work. Little did she know, her journey was about to come to an abrupt and dramatic halt before it even began. The first-class cabin of the Aura, a 380, was an oasis of muted grays and soft lighting. Each seat was a self-contained pod, offering privacy and luxury. Serafina navigated the aisle to the second row and stopped. Her seat, 2A, was occupied. Caroline Sterling was already there, her trench coat haphazardly thrown over the adjoining seat, her designer handbag placed firmly on the console. She was busy wiping down the leather headrest with an antibacterial wipe, her expression one of deep dissatisfaction. Serafina paused, assuming a simple mistake. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm and polite. "I believe you're in my seat." Caroline looked up, her blue eyes cold and dismissive. She gave Serafina a slow, condescending up-and-down glance, taking in the simple clothes and youthful face. "Oh, I highly doubt that, sweetie," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. "This is the first-class cabin. Your seat is probably further back." The microaggression was as familiar as it was infuriating. "You don't belong here." Serafina held her ground, her politeness hardening into a cool resolve. "My boarding pass says 2A. Perhaps you could check yours?" Caroline scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "I don't need to check anything. I'm in 2A, the window seat. I always sit in the window seat." She turned away, a clear dismissal. Serafina refused to be dismissed. "I understand you prefer the window, but this specific one is assigned to me. I can show you." She held out her phone, the digital boarding pass clearly displaying Monroe, Serafina, and Seat 2A. Caroline didn't even look at it. "Listen, I don't know how you got up here. Maybe you used your boyfriend's miles or won some sort of contest, but I'm not moving. The lighting is better on this side for my work, so find another seat or go talk to a flight attendant." The mention of a contest was the final straw. Serafina's patience, while vast, had its limits. The quiet injustice she'd endured in countless luxury shops, exclusive restaurants, and five-star hotels was now playing out at 30,000 feet inside her own family's company. At that moment, a senior flight attendant named Mark approached, his smile warm and professional. "Is there a problem here, ladies?" "Yes," Caroline snapped, seizing the offensive. "This young woman is insisting this is her seat, and she's harassing me. I'd like her removed." Mark looked from Caroline's indignant face to Serafina's composed one. He was well trained in de-escalation. "Of course, ma'am. May I see both of your boarding passes, please? We can sort this out in a jiffy." Serafina immediately showed Mark her phone. He nodded. "Thank you, Miss Monroe. Everything seems correct here." He then turned to Caroline. "Ma'am, could I please see yours?" Caroline's face tightened. She rummaged in her purse with theatrical slowness before pulling out a crumpled paper pass. "Here, though I don't see why this is necessary." Mark took it and his professional smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He cleared his throat. "Ah, I see the confusion. Ma'am, your assigned seat is 4F. That's the aisle seat in the fourth row." "That's impossible," Caroline declared, her voice rising. "My assistant booked this. She knows I only take a window seat. Your system must be broken." "I assure you our system is working perfectly," Mark said, his tone still even but with a new edge of firmness. "Miss Monroe is in her correct seat. I'm going to have to ask you to move to 4F so we can continue boarding." Other passengers were now beginning to stare. The low hum of the cabin was replaced by an awkward silence, punctuated by Caroline's increasingly loud protests. "This is absolutely ridiculous. I am a Platinum Elite member. I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars with this airline every year. I will not be treated like this. This girl," she said, jabbing a finger in Serafina's direction, "can sit in 4F. I'm sure she won't mind. She should be grateful to be up here at all." The racial undertone was now an overtone, thick and suffocating. Serafina felt a cold anger coalesce in her chest. It wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about the casual, venomous prejudice that assumed her presence was an anomaly, a charity case. Mark's face was now a stern, unsmiling mask. "Ma'am, I'm not asking you again. Please gather your belongings and move to your assigned seat, or I will have to involve the gate supervisor and the captain. We will not delay this flight." Caroline Sterling crossed her arms, a smirk playing on her lips. It was the smirk of someone who had always gotten her way, who believed rules were for other people. "Go ahead. Get your little supervisor. Get the captain. Let's see who they side with. Me, a loyal, high-value customer, or her." She leaned back in seat 2A, the picture of defiant entitlement. She had made her move, confident the corporate hierarchy would bend to her will, as it always had. She had no idea she wasn't playing chess with a pawn. She had just tried to bully the queen in her own castle. And the king was about to hear about it. Serafina looked at the defiant woman in her seat, at the flustered but resolute flight attendant, and at the curious faces of the other passengers. She could have escalated things, demanded Caroline be forcibly removed. She could have dropped her father's name like a bomb, incinerating the situation instantly. But that wasn't her style. Her father had taught her that true power wasn't in shouting. It was in making a single decisive move that ended the game. With a quiet sigh, she gave Mark a small, apologetic nod. "It's all right, Mark. Thank you for your help. I'm just going to step out for a moment to make a phone call." Caroline let out a triumphant little snort, assuming Serafina was retreating in defeat. "Good idea. Call whoever you need to call. Maybe they can find you a nice spot in coach." Ignoring the jibe, Serafina turned and walked gracefully back up the aisle and off the jet bridge, her tote bag in hand. The gate agent, Ben, saw her emerge and looked concerned. "Miss Monroe, is everything okay?" "Just a small issue with seating, Ben. I need to make a quick call," she said, her voice betraying none of the cold fury simmering beneath her calm exterior. She found a quiet spot against the terminal window, overlooking the massive aircraft she was supposed to be on. The name Aura was painted in elegant silver letters on the fuselage, a name that was synonymous with Monroe. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a number marked simply Dad. He answered on the first ring. Julian Monroe never let a call from his daughter go to voicemail. "Serafina, you should be in the air by now. Everything all right?" His voice was deep, resonant, and carried the unmistakable weight of command. "I'm fine, Dad, but there's a situation on Flight 712. She quickly and dispassionately recounted the entire incident, from Caroline Sterling's initial condescension to her refusal to move, and the thinly veiled racist remarks. She reported the facts like a witness, without embellishment or hysterics. On the other end of the line, in his penthouse office overlooking Century City, Julian Monroe listened without interruption. His knuckles whitened as he gripped a sterling silver pen. When she finished, there was a long, dangerous silence. "What is the passenger's name?" he finally asked, his voice deceptively calm. "Caroline Sterling," Serafina replied. "And the crew, they followed protocol?" "Perfectly. A flight attendant named Mark was professional and firm. The woman refused to comply and demanded to see the captain." Another pause. Serafina could practically hear the gears turning in her father's mind, the cold, logistical calculus that had built his empire. He wasn't thinking like a father anymore. He was thinking like a CEO. No, he was thinking like a king whose authority had been challenged in his own court. "Serafina," he said, his voice now devoid of any warmth, replaced by a chillingly placid authority. "Listen to me very carefully. Do not get back on that plane. Stay in the terminal. I am handling this. Dad, what are you going to do? Just have her removed. It's not a big deal. It is a very big deal. He cut her off, the steel in his voice absolute. My daughter was harassed and racially profiled on my airline. A crew member's authority was undermined, and a platinum status passenger believes her money gives her the right to ignore protocol and decency. This is not a customer service issue, Serafina. It's a cancer, and I'm going to cut it out. What does that mean? She asked, a sense of dread mixing with her anger. It means that Flight 712 is no longer flying to New York today. The operational integrity of that flight has been compromised. Serafina was stunned. You're going to cancel the whole flight? Dad, there are hundreds of people on that plane. They have meetings, vacations, families to get to. And they will all be compensated, rerouted, and given a sincere apology for the inconvenience, Julian stated flatly. But that aircraft will not leave the gate with a single person on board who witnessed a member of my flight crew being flagrantly disrespected and a passenger being subjected to that kind of abuse, only to see the perpetrator get a slap on the wrist. That's not the standard of Aura Airlines. That is not the standard of Julian Monroe. The message must be unequivocal. He was no longer talking to his daughter. He was issuing a decree. A car is on its way to the arrivals level for you. The Gulf Stream is being prepared. You'll be in New York in 4 hours. I have to make some calls. I love you. The line went dead. Serafina stood frozen for a moment, the phone still pressed to her ear. She looked out the window at the enormous plane, a silent city of people waiting to cross the country. Her father had used a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but she knew his reasoning. It was a brutal, extravagant, and utterly decisive display of power, meant to send a shockwave not just through the cabin but through the entire company. Caroline Sterling wanted to see the person in charge. She was about to find out just how high that went. Back on Flight 712, Caroline Sterling was basking in what she perceived as her victory. The young woman had scurried off the plane, tail between her legs. Mark, the flight attendant, was conferring in hushed tones with another crew member near the galley, both of them occasionally glancing her way with anxious expressions. Other passengers were settling in, pulling out laptops and headphones, the brief drama seemingly over. Caroline smirked, adjusting her cashmere scarf. She had won. As always, she pulled out her phone to text her assistant. Some girl tried to cause a scene over my seat, handled it, confirmed the car is set for JFK. Suddenly, the captain's voice filled the cabin, calm and authoritative, cutting through the low hum of activity. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking from the flight deck. I do apologize for the slight delay in our departure. A collective, barely audible sigh of impatience rippled through the plane. We have just been informed by our Los Angeles Ground Control and Operations Center of an unforeseen and significant operational issue with this aircraft. I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. For the safety and integrity of our service, Aura Airlines Flight 712 to New York has been canceled. The announcement landed like a physical blow. A wave of disbelief washed over the cabin, followed by a tidal wave of outrage. Canceled, a man in a business suit in the row behind Caroline exclaimed. What do you mean canceled? I have a $10 million deposition in Manhattan at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Are you kidding me? A woman shouted from the economy cabin. We're going to my sister's wedding. The cabin erupted into a cacophony of angry, confused voices. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, trying to placate the passengers with practiced but overwhelmed assurances. We understand your frustration. Please remain seated for deplaning instructions. All passengers will be rebooked and compensated. Caroline Sterling was dumbfounded. Canceled? The whole flight? It made no sense. The engines were running. The crew was on board. Operational issue was just corporate jargon for something they didn't want to explain. A furious suspicion began to form in her mind. This couldn't be a coincidence. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, confronting Mark as he passed. This is because of that girl, isn't it? She demanded, her voice shrill. This is some kind of retaliation because I wouldn't give up my seat. Mark looked at her with an expression of profound, weary disappointment. "Ma'am, all I know is that we received a direct order from the highest level of corporate command. The flight is cancelled. We will all be deplanning shortly. Please return to your seat until the jet bridge is reattached." "The highest level," Caroline repeated, her mind racing. Who was that girl? What kind of connections did she have to pull a stunt like this? It was insane. It was impossible. The process of deplaning was slow and fraught with tension. Passengers grumbled, cursed, and frantically typed on their phones, trying to salvage their ruined travel plans. The mood was toxic. As Caroline shuffled down the aisle, clutching her expensive handbag, she felt dozens of angry eyes on her. The businessman who had been sitting behind her glared with pure venom. "I hope you're happy," he hissed as she passed. "Whatever you did, you've screwed over 300 people." She finally stepped off the jet bridge into the chaos of the terminal gate area. It was swarming with furious passengers surrounding the gate agents, demanding answers, flights, and refunds. And in the middle of it all, being escorted away by two stern-looking airport officials in dark suits, was Mark, the flight attendant. He was being taken for a formal debriefing. He met Caroline's eyes for a fleeting second, and his look was not one of anger, but of a grim, almost pitiable resolve. Caroline's phone buzzed. It was a news alert from a major aviation blog. She tapped on it and her blood ran cold. The headline read, "Era Airlines Flight 712 LAX JFK abruptly cancelled. Unconfirmed report zero tolerance incident involving a disruptive first-class passenger." Her picture wasn't there, not yet, but her name was already being whispered in the furious crowd. Someone had been filming. Someone always was. Caroline felt a primal surge of panic. This was spiraling out of control. She needed to get out of there. She turned away from the mob and started walking, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't know who Serafina Monroe was, but she was beginning to understand that she had just made the biggest mistake of her entire life. The consequences were just beginning, and the fallout was going to be far, far worse than a ruined travel day. While the passengers of the cancelled Flight 712 were rebooking flights and venting their fury, a tech blogger named David Chen, who had been seated in 3C, was uploading a video. He had discreetly filmed the entire confrontation between Caroline and Serafina, his tech journalist instincts sensing a story. He captured Caroline's condescending remarks, Serafina's quiet dignity, Mark's professionalism, and Caroline's final, defiant refusal to move. He uploaded it to every social media platform he had with a simple, devastating title. Entitled Passenger Racially Profiles Young Woman for First Class Seat 2A on Aura Flight 712. Woman refuses to move. Airline cancels entire flight in response. He tagged Aura Airlines and used hashtags, #Caroline Sterling #flight, 712 #Aura Airlines #Karen on a plane. The video didn't just go viral. It achieved a kind of digital singularity, exploding across the internet with the force of a supernova. Within an hour, it had 1 million views. Within 3 hours, 10 million. The court of public opinion delivered its verdict with brutal, instantaneous efficiency. Caroline Sterling became, in the space of an afternoon, one of the most hated people in America. Her face was everywhere. Memes were created. Her LinkedIn profile was discovered, and screenshots of her job title, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions at Blackwood & Finch, a prestigious private equity firm, were posted and shared thousands of times per minute. The official social media accounts for Blackwood & Finch were inundated with a tidal wave of fury. Is this the kind of person you have representing your company? Fire Caroline Sterling. #fire Caroline Sterling. Blackwood & Finch clearly supports racism and corporate bullying. Shameful. Meanwhile, Serafina Monroe was flying at 40,000 feet in the serene cream and walnut interior of her father's Gulfstream G700. A satellite internet connection provided a live feed of the digital storm unfolding below. She watched the video, a knot tightening in her stomach. Seeing the incident from an outside perspective was even more jarring. The contempt in Caroline's voice was unmistakable. Her father sat across from her, his tablet displaying a dozen different news feeds and a secure video conference with his executive team. He wasn't celebrating. His expression was grim, focused. "The PR team is drafting the official statement," he said, not looking up. "We're leaning into it. No apologies for the cancellation. Full emphasis on our zero-tolerance policy for harassment of any kind, directed at passengers or crew. We're positioning it as a stand for corporate responsibility and employee protection." "And the passengers?" Serafina asked quietly. "Every single one has been rerouted on the next available flight, with us or a competitor, at our expense. Each of them has received a full refund, a $10,000 travel voucher for future use with Aura, and a formal letter of apology from me personally for the disruption. The family going to the wedding? We chartered a private jet for them. They'll get there before their original flight was scheduled to land. The businessman with the deposition. My legal team is already in contact with his, explaining the situation and offering any support needed to have it rescheduled. We're not just managing the fallout, we're controlling it." He finally looked at his daughter, his eyes softening. "This wasn't just about you, Sarah. This was a teachable moment on a global scale. People like Caroline Sterling operate because they believe there are no real consequences for their behavior. They believe their money and status insulate them. Today we prove that belief wrong." Back on the ground, Caroline Sterling was learning that lesson in the most visceral way possible. She had managed to escape the airport and get into a taxi, her phone buzzing incessantly. She finally answered a call from a blocked number. It was Alistair Davies, the managing partner and CEO of Blackwood & Finch. His voice was not angry. It was something far worse. A low, guttural, terrifyingly calm rumble of pure fury. "Caroline, I have seen the video." "Alistair, it's been completely blown out of proportion," she began, her voice trembling. "It was a simple misunderstanding about a seat. This girl, she overreacted and—" "Shut up, Caroline," he hissed, cutting her off. "Just shut up and listen. Our firm's name is currently the #1 trending topic on Twitter, right alongside the word racist. Our investors are calling. Our clients are calling. The board is demanding an emergency meeting. You haven't just embarrassed yourself. You have jeopardized the reputation of this entire firm. A reputation that took 50 years to build, and that you have torn down in the space of an afternoon. I can fix this. I'll issue a statement. I'll apologize. An apology won't stop the bleeding, Caroline. You have become a liability of catastrophic proportions. Clear out your desk. Security will escort you from the building. Your termination papers and a non-disclosure agreement will be couriered to your home by the end of the day. Do not contact anyone from the firm again. We're done." The line went dead. Caroline sat in the back of the taxi, the skyline of Los Angeles blurring past the window. Fired. It was impossible. Her entire life, her identity, was her job. She was Caroline Sterling, the shark of acquisitions, the woman who closed impossible deals. Now, she was nothing, just a hashtag, a meme, a villain in a viral video. And yet, in her shock and despair, she still didn't understand the full scope of her disaster. She thought she had hit rock bottom. The truth was, the ground was still miles below her. The true karmic twist, the one that would ruin her beyond all repair, was yet to be revealed. She hadn't just insulted a billionaire's daughter. She had, with her own arrogance, personally sabotaged the single biggest deal of her career and her company's future. The meeting Caroline Sterling was flying to New York for was the culmination of 18 months of brutal, painstaking work. It was the crowning achievement of her career. Blackwood & Finch was on the verge of acquiring MTech Innovations, a revolutionary AI-driven logistics company, for a staggering $500 million. The deal would catapult Blackwood & Finch into the tech stratosphere and personally net Caroline a bonus in the 8-figure range. The final signing was scheduled for the next morning. It was a deal shrouded in secrecy, as MTech's parent company was a notoriously private and powerful conglomerate. All Caroline knew was that she had to impress its enigmatic founder and CEO, a man whose reputation for being a ruthless but brilliant visionary preceded him. He was known for his obsession with efficiency, integrity, and character. As she sat numbly in her silent, opulent Los Angeles home, her phone rang again. It was her former boss, Alistair Davies. She almost didn't answer, but some morbid curiosity compelled her to. His voice was hollow, defeated. "I thought you should know, Caroline. The MTech deal is dead." "What?" she whispered. "No, they can't pull out now. We have a letter of intent. It's practically done." Alistair let out a dry, mirthless laugh. "It's done, all right. I just got off the phone with their CEO. He terminated the agreement, effective immediately, cited a fundamental misalignment of corporate culture and character." Caroline's mind was a fog of confusion. How? How could he even know about the video already? This time the silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. When Alistair finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, freighted with the weight of a dawning cosmic horror. "Because, Caroline, the famously private parent company of MTech Innovations is the Monroe Innovations Group." Caroline felt the air leave her lungs. The name echoed in her ears. Monroe, the boarding pass, Miss Monroe, the flight attendant's deferential tone. It all clicked into place with the sickening finality of a guillotine. "The CEO we were meeting tomorrow morning, Caroline," Alistair continued, his voice cracking with the sheer, agonizing weight of the revelation. "The man you just spent the last year and a half trying to impress was Julian Monroe. The girl whose seat you stole, the young woman you belittled and racially profiled, was his daughter, Serafina Monroe." The world tilted on its axis. The scale of her blunder was so immense, so astronomically stupid it was almost incomprehensible. She hadn't just picked a fight with a random passenger. She had, in a fit of petty arrogance, personally insulted the family of the very man who held the fate of her career, her bonus, and her company's future in his hands. He hadn't just canceled a flight to teach her a lesson. He had canceled it to protect his daughter, and in doing so, had witnessed firsthand the toxic character of the executive his company was about to go into business with. "He told me," Alistair said, his voice a ghost. "He told me the deal was dead the second he heard your name from his daughter. He said, and I quote, 'I would never allow the culture of my company to be poisoned by the kind of prejudice and entitlement exhibited by your senior vice president. If that is the character of the people at Blackwood and Finch, then there is nothing further to discuss.'" He hung up. $500 million, Caroline. Gone. Because you couldn't be bothered to sit in 4F. Caroline dropped the phone. A wave of nausea washed over her. It wasn't just karma. This was a form of divine, laser-guided retribution. It was the universe constructing the most ironic, most devastatingly perfect punishment imaginable. She had flown across the country to secure a deal with a man, only to have it vaporized because she had bullied his daughter on a plane he owned. Her career wasn't just over. Her entire legacy was now a smoking crater. She wouldn't just be known as the woman from the viral video. In the elite circles of finance and private equity, she would be whispered about for decades as the woman who single-handedly fumbled a $500 million deal over a window seat. Her name was no longer just toxic. It was a legend of corporate self-destruction. The silence in Caroline Sterling's Brentwood mansion was a living entity. It was a thick, suffocating presence that had swallowed the ceaseless hum of ambition that once defined her life. For the first 48 hours after her termination, she did not leave the house. Her phone, once a conduit of power that buzzed with 100 calls and texts an hour from analysts, assistants, and executives, now lay dark and inert on her marble kitchen island. The only notifications that broke the silence were vicious algorithm-driven news alerts bearing her own name, each a fresh nail in her professional coffin. Her world, once a global network of influence, had shrunk to the dimensions of her immaculately decorated, oppressively quiet home. The abstract paintings on the walls, purchased as investments, now seemed to mock her with their chaotic, meaningless splashes of color. The floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Los Angeles felt less like a vista and more like the glass walls of a terrarium, putting her on display for a world that now despised her. Initially, denial was her shield. This was a PR crisis, she told herself, a fire that could be contained and managed. She was Caroline Sterling. She didn't get fired. She orchestrated takeovers. She spent the first day drafting statements in her head, planning a strategic apology tour on morning news shows. She called her personal lawyer, a pit bull of a man named Marcus Thorne who had navigated her through contentious contract negotiations for years. The meeting in his Century City office was the first crack in her armor of denial. Marcus, usually a bastion of aggressive optimism, looked at her over the rim of his glasses with an expression of profound pity. "There's nothing we can do, Caroline," he said, his voice flat. He slid a copy of her employment contract across the polished mahogany desk. A paragraph was highlighted in yellow. The moral turpitude clause. Your actions were public, they were widely disseminated, and they caused direct, calculable, and catastrophic harm to the firm's reputation and financial standing. They have you dead to rights. Any lawsuit for wrongful termination would be laughed out of court and only serve to drag your name through the mud even further. "So I get nothing?" she asked, her voice a raw whisper. 20 years of building that acquisitions department generating billions in revenue, and I walk away with nothing? They're honoring the base salary outlined in your contract's severance terms, which, as you know, is minimal, Marcus explained, avoiding her gaze. As for your stock options, the bulk of them were unvested. And with the news of the MTech deal collapsing, the company's stock has plummeted by 30%. Your vested shares are now worth a fraction of their value. You're not destitute, Caroline, but the fortune you thought you had, it's gone. He pushed another document towards her, the NDA. It was brutally restrictive, legally gagging her from ever speaking about Blackwood and Finch, Alistair Davies, or the MTech deal. In return for her silence, they wouldn't pursue a civil suit against her for damages. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. She signed it, her hand trembling. The financial blow was devastating, but the social implosion was a death by 1,000 cuts. A week after the incident, desperate for a semblance of normalcy, she drove to the exclusive Riviera Country Club, a place where her name once parted crowds. As she walked into the dining room, a hush fell over the tables. Conversations didn't just stop, they were choked off. The members, bankers, producers, surgeons, people she had networked and socialized with for a decade, stared at her for a moment before turning away, their backs a uniform wall of rejection. Eleanor Vance, a woman with whom she co-chaired a charity gala just a month prior, saw her, and her face froze in a mask of polite horror. She gave a curt, almost imperceptible shake of her head, and immediately became engrossed in conversation with her lunch partner. The message was clear. You are a contagion. You do not belong here anymore. Caroline fled, her face burning with a humiliation so profound it felt like a physical acid. She had spent her life cultivating an aura of untouchable power. She had believed that respect was a byproduct of fear and success. Now, stripped of her title and her wealth, she realized she had never earned respect, only commanded compliance. Without her power, she had nothing. She was an outcast. Her days devolved into a hollow routine of watching financial news channels report on the continued fallout at Blackwood and Finch, her name always mentioned like a curse. Alistair Davies had been forced to resign. The firm was facing a deluge of shareholder lawsuits, citing gross mismanagement and a catastrophic failure of executive oversight. She had not just ended her own career, she had crippled the entire institution. There was a grim, twisted irony in it. In the end, she had orchestrated the most successful hostile takeover of her life, of the very company that had made her. Meanwhile, in New York, Serafina Monroe was experiencing a different kind of reckoning. The viral storm had, by and large, painted her as a figure of quiet grace and dignity. She received an outpouring of support, but it brought her little comfort. She scrolled through articles and comment sections, watching the digital mob dismantle Caroline Sterling's life with a terrifying ferocity. She saw the news of Blackwood and Finch's collapse, of lives and careers upended, all of it tracing back to her, to Seat 2A. The sheer scale of the destruction felt disproportionate, unsettling. She sat in her suite at the Mandarin Oriental, overlooking Central Park, a folder of blueprints for the Bronx Community Center open on her lap. The project was about construction, about building something positive and lasting, yet she felt complicit in an act of utter demolition. A few days after arriving, a small hand-delivered envelope arrived from Aura Airlines' New York office. Inside was a handwritten card. "Miss Monroe," it began. "My name is Mark Peterson. I was the senior flight attendant on Flight 712. I wanted to thank you and your father. In my 15 years of flying, I have been verbally abused, threatened, and disrespected more times than I can count by passengers who believe their ticket price buys them the right to treat us as less than human. We file reports, but nothing ever really changes. What your father did, canceling that flight, it was the talk of the entire company. For the first time, we feel like someone at the very top not only understands, but has our back, unequivocally. You didn't just stand up for yourself that day. You stood up for every crew member who has ever had to endure that kind of behavior. Thank you. Sincerely, Mark." Serafina read the note 3 times. It was a perspective she hadn't fully considered. For her, the event was a personal, humiliating confrontation. For her father, it was a strategic execution of corporate policy. But for Mark and thousands like him, it was a revolution. It was a declaration that their dignity mattered. The thought eased some of the weight on her conscience, reframing the narrative from one of pure destruction to one of protection and validation. The day of the groundbreaking was bright and crisp. The lot in the Bronx was buzzing with an energy that was the polar opposite of the tense, moneyed silence of the LAX first-class lounge. There were community activists, local politicians, families with children, all gathered to celebrate the beginning of something new. Her father, Julian, arrived just before the ceremony, eschewing a grand entrance. He looked more at ease here, in a simple navy blazer and open-collared shirt, than he ever did in a boardroom. He watched with a quiet, intense pride as Serafina took the podium and spoke, not about money or architecture, but about creating safe spaces, about community, about the simple idea that everyone deserves a place where they feel they belong. After the speeches and the ceremonial turning of the dirt, they stood to one side, watching the crowd mingle and celebrate. "I've been thinking about Caroline Sterling," Serafina said, breaking the comfortable silence. "About everything that happened to her firm. It's all gone. Her entire life's work evaporated." Julian nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on a group of children laughing. "It is." "Did we go too far?" she asked, the question that had been haunting her. Was it right to unleash that much power to cause that much damage over one person's prejudice? Does it make us bullies in a way? Julian turned to face her, his expression serious. "Let me tell you something, Sarah. When you were 6 years old, we were in Paris. I had just closed a big deal, and I wanted to buy your mother a necklace from a famous jeweler on the Place Vendôme. We walked in, and the store was empty except for the staff. The moment they saw us, 3 well-dressed black people, the temperature in the room dropped. The manager told us they were closed for a private event. I could see the lie in his eyes. He didn't see a customer, he saw a threat. He saw someone who didn't belong." He paused, the memory still sharp. "I could have made a scene. I could have bought the entire store just to spite him. But I was young, and I didn't want to upset you or your mother. So we left. I have never forgotten the look of quiet humiliation on your mother's face. And I swore to myself that day, never again would I allow my family to be treated as less than because someone else's prejudice made them feel powerful." He looked from the memory back to his daughter's face. "What Caroline Sterling did to you wasn't just rude, Sarah. It was a symptom of the same disease. It was the casual, easy dehumanization that people in power practice on those they perceive to be beneath them. My response was not about her. It was a response to every dismissive glance, every locked door, every whispered insult you and I and people who look like us have ever had to endure. It was a message, sent with the loudest bullhorn I own, that the rules of decency are not optional. They are the cost of admission into our world, whether that world is a first-class cabin or a $500 million partnership. The M-Tech deal, he continued, his voice shifting to the cool tone of a CEO. Her actions revealed a fatal character flaw. Business, at its highest level, is about trust. How could I trust a firm whose top executive displays such appalling judgment and moral bankruptcy? Her prejudice wasn't just a personal failing. It was a systemic risk to my company. Terminating that deal was the easiest and most logical business decision I've made all year. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Power is a dangerous tool, Serafina. It can corrupt and it can cleanse. Using it to tear someone down for sport is weakness, but using it to protect your own, to enforce a standard of integrity, and to realign a system that is out of balance, that is not bullying. That is leadership. Serafina looked out at the joyful crowd, at the tangible hope for the future being built on this patch of dirt. She finally understood. Her father's act was not one of simple vengeance. It was a violent, seismic correction. It was the pulling of a weed, root, and stem, so that something better could have the chance to grow. There was no pleasure in Caroline Sterling's ruin, but there was a profound and necessary clarity. It was the final, brutal reckoning for a debt of disrespect that had been accumulating for a lifetime, a debt that was finally and publicly paid in full. 1 year to the day after the flight that never left the ground, a different kind of takeoff was being celebrated in the Bronx. The dust and machinery were gone, replaced by the laughter of children on a newly built playground, the excited chatter of teenagers in a state-of-the-art computer lab, and the quiet contentment of seniors playing chess in a sun-drenched atrium. The Serafina Monroe Community and Innovation Hub was officially open. It was more than a building. It was a testament to constructive power, a vibrant, living answer to the question of what one should do with immense influence. Serafina stood near the entrance, a simple plaque bearing the building's name gleaming beside her. She had traded her hard hat for a chic but understated dress, and she watched the bustling scene not with the distant satisfaction of a donor, but with the intimate pride of a creator. She knew the names of the community leaders, the local artists whose work adorned the walls, and the families who would now have a safe, enriching place to gather. The incident a year ago had been a crucible, forging a new sense of purpose within her. She had stepped out from behind her blueprints and embraced her name, not as a shield or a burden, but as a tool to be wielded for tangible good. The media coverage of the center's opening was extensive, praising the Monroe Foundation's commitment and Serafina's hands-on design and leadership. In several articles, a new corporate initiative was mentioned, spearheaded by Serafina herself, the Aura Initiative. It was a multi-million-dollar program within Aura Airlines focused on two things: providing scholarships and fast-track management training for underrepresented groups in the aviation industry, and a complete overhaul of customer service and conflict resolution training, with modules designed by top sociologists and psychologists. The 712 Protocol, as it became known internally, was now the gold standard for empowering crew members. The message was clear. Aura Airlines was not just an airline. It was a company with an enforced code of ethics. The canceled flight had become a cornerstone of its corporate identity. Hundreds of miles away, in a quiet, anonymous suburb of Chicago, Caroline Sterling was packing the last of her belongings into a cardboard box. The Brentwood mansion, with its mocking silence and ghost-filled rooms, had been sold months ago to cover legal fees and provide a cushion for her new, drastically reduced life. She had moved to the Midwest to escape the pitying glances and whispered insults, to become someone else, or rather, to become no one at all. Her new home was a modest, two-bedroom condominium in a complex that prized conformity over character. Her days, once a whirlwind of high-stakes negotiations and transatlantic flights, were now a monotonous stretch of silence. She had applied for dozens of jobs in finance and consulting, but her name was an instant deal-breaker. The viral video was her digital ghost, an eternal testament to her downfall that would surface with a simple Google search. She was unemployable in the world she once dominated. One crisp autumn afternoon, she was sitting in a local coffee shop, nursing a cup of tea and trying to read a novel, an activity she still found foreign and unfulfilling. A commotion near the counter drew her attention. A man in an expensive suit was berating the young barista, a girl no older than 19, his voice laced with the same arrogant contempt that Caroline knew so intimately. "I said a non-fat extra hot latte with 2.5 pumps of sugar-free vanilla," he sneered, holding up the cup as if it were toxic waste. "This is lukewarm and it tastes like you dumped the whole bottle in. Is it really that difficult to follow simple instructions? Are you incompetent?" The barista was on the verge of tears, stammering apologies. "I'm so sorry, sir. I can remake it for you right away." "You're damn right you will," the man scoffed loudly, ensuring the entire coffee shop could hear. "People like you should be grateful to even have a job." Caroline froze, the ceramic mug trembling in her hand. It was like watching a memory play out before her eyes. The same entitled posture, the same public humiliation of someone just trying to do their job, the same casual cruelty wielded like a weapon. A year ago, she wouldn't have even noticed. Or worse, she would have silently agreed with the man. But now she felt a sickening wave of self-recognition. She saw herself in his sneer, in his abuse of perceived status, and for the first time, she truly, deeply felt the other side. She felt the burning shame of the barista, the cringing discomfort of the other patrons, the sheer ugliness of the moment. Her heart began to pound in her chest. A part of her, the old Caroline, wanted to ignore it, to shrink back into her anonymity. But another, newer part of her, a part born of total ruin and forced reflection, was screaming. She felt an overwhelming urge to stand up, to say something, to tell the man how precarious his world of arrogance truly was, how one such moment could unravel an entire life. But she didn't. She couldn't. Her own public shame paralyzed her. What would she say? Who was she to say it? The hypocrisy would be suffocating. Instead, she watched as the manager came over, diffused the situation, and gave the man a refund and a new coffee. The man took it with a final, triumphant smirk and left. Caroline sat there for a long time after he was gone, the book forgotten in her lap. She wasn't redeemed. She hadn't become a better person overnight. But in that moment, she understood. She finally truly understood the corrosive nature of her past behavior. It wasn't just a bad day or a misunderstanding. It was a character flaw that had poisoned her from the inside out. There was no pleasure in this understanding, only the cold, bitter taste of a lesson learned far too late. She paid for her tea and walked out into the anonymous afternoon, a ghost haunted by the woman she used to be. Back in the Bronx, as evening fell and the celebration at the community center wound down, Julian Monroe found his daughter standing alone in the new library, running her hand over the spine of a book. "I was just reading about what happened to Blackwood and Finch," she said quietly, gesturing to a financial newspaper left on a table. "A competitor acquired them last week. They're dissolving the name. It's like it never existed." "Some legacies are meant to be erased," Julian said, standing beside her. He looked around the beautiful, peaceful room, at the shelves filled with books waiting to be read. "This, on the other hand, this is a legacy that will last." He looked at Serafina, and the formidable CEO melted away, leaving only a proud father. "What you've done here, Sarah, is remarkable. You've taken the fallout from an ugly, destructive event, and you've built something that will enrich thousands of lives. I used my power to tear something down to protect you. You, in turn, have used your power to build something better for everyone. You learned the lesson I hoped you would, that our family's greatest asset isn't our money. It's our ability to set a standard and to turn our values into action." Serafina met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a quiet, confident strength that hadn't been there a year ago. That day taught me that power isn't a title or a bank account. It's the ability to shape the world around you. You can shape it into a place of fear and exclusion, like Caroline Sterling did, or you can shape it into a place of opportunity and respect. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. I know which one I choose. Julian put his arm around her shoulders, and together they looked out the window at the lights of the community center twinkling against the darkening New York sky. The echoes of Flight 712 had finally faded, replaced by the sounds of a hopeful future. The karma had been delivered, the consequences paid. But the final chapter wasn't about ruin. It was about the deliberate, powerful, and far more difficult act of creation. It was the story of how a stolen seat led not just to a fall from grace, but to the building of a legacy. And so Caroline Sterling's world crumbled, not because of one grand villainous act, but because of 1,000 small moments of arrogance that finally culminated in one catastrophic mistake. This story serves as a powerful real-world reminder that our actions, especially how we treat people when we think no one important is watching, have consequences that can ripple out in ways we can never predict. It's a story of prejudice, power, and the spectacular, life-altering price of entitlement. What do you think? Was Julian Monroe's decision to cancel the entire flight justified? Or was it an abuse of power? Is this the ultimate karma, or a cautionary tale about the immense power wielded by the ultra-wealthy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story shocked and captivated you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life dramas you won't find anywhere else. Thanks for listening.